If you'd like early access to The Black Ship and other stories featured on our YouTube channel, join our Patreon site where the author receives a percentage of everyone who subscribes. Just signing up for free will get you early access to the reboot of The Last Humans as well as all the latest channel news. Now on with the story. Matcha, Grand Palace, Central Command Room. The prince quietly drummed on the table, his fingers giving a faint, fleshy beat that he couldn't hear over the organized chaos that surrounded him. Men and women were at their stations, typing on keyboards and receiving reports from conflict zones across Finnegan border systems. A select few were fully immersed in the network itself, rotating every few hours with fresh personnel to avoid burning out their minds as they had to manage data streams and process the information correctly. Even with the help of AI, it was a daunting task. His eyes moved across the large holographic map showcasing the extent of his forces and their current positions. That being said, his uncle had ensured that military communications from those loyal to him would face disconnections, lag, and constant attacks that hindered them on a large scale and reduced them to pockets of resistance instead of a unified force ready to strike against the would-be usurper. Isolated, divided, disorganized, and wounded as his loyal forces were, they had not been broken. At the same time, however, such a tactic forced Draymore's ships and soldiers to divide themselves into containing such pockets, whittling them down one wound at a time, or risk setting them loose and joining with other loyalist forces, creating a cascading effect that they would be hard-pressed to contain. It was a sound, if lengthy, strategy under normal circumstances, but the black ships at the Duke's disposal shifted the balance to his favor. His only solace was that the usurpers didn't have an endless supply of such vessels and most of said ships, while powerful in surprise attacks and striking from the blackness of the void, were decidedly not dedicated ships of the line. So far, ever since Clara's departure, he'd overseen several skirmishes taking place and 2 assaults into Caiston systems to test their forces and response time. The after-action reports, those coming from scattered agents and spy probes, confirmed what he had feared. They were currently outmatched nearly 3-to-1 in the number of available warships. The traders had access to their shipyard inside their territories and kept producing ships at a slow but steady rate, replenishing their losses from the fleets and house vessels. He wasn't helpless, but he simply couldn't match his uncle's forces blow for blow. The fleets that had remained loyal to him suffered several casualties, be they destroyed utterly, captured, or disabled during the start of the coup. In turn, the fleets loyal to the Duke had sustained only a fraction of the damage they inflicted. His only true relief was that as long as they refrained from employing conscription, violating the rights of life that protected the commoners from blatant, cruel, uncaring tyranny, respected the trade lanes and the neutrality of houses, the conflict would remain as a succession dispute. Duke Cornelius is a wise, cautious man. I must be thankful for that. Many others wouldn't care about the good and future of the principality as long as their megalomaniacal thirst for power was satiated, preferring to rule over burned worlds and ruins before letting others bear the crown. Had he chosen the path of bloodshed, plunging us all into a civil war, the conflict would have been short-lived but brutal, surely paid in the blood of countless millions perishing just to slake the thirst of their betters, the prince thought grimly as he refrained himself from letting out a sigh. "Are you unwell, my prince?" Juliana Winfield asked in a soft but firm as titanium tone. "I am fine, Juliana," he replied with a certainty he did not possess. Not bothering to look at her as she stood next to his command chair, he continued, "I thought you were overseeing the training of our new Marines." Juliana crossed her arms, her elegant and pressed uniform refusing to leave a single wrinkle as she moved. With a huff of annoyance, she answered, "I'm trying to cram several years of proper training, etiquette, and knowledge into glory-seeking and blind fools with mere months to prepare. It is frustrating." "For you to complain so openly, I will not doubt your claims," the prince replied as a corner of his mouth curled into a tiny smirk. "Surely, I presume, not all is lost." "There are a select few that show both competence and talent. I will do my best to not break them completely before I finish polishing them into worthwhile Marines ready to serve you, my prince, and the principality," Juliana answered. "Good to hear," the prince said, his attention never shifting from the display. A couple of minutes passed by at a glacial pace until the prince, defeated, exhaled through his nose tiredly. "Is it that obvious?" "Very," Juliana confessed. "Clara will contact you, my prince, once she has news worth conveying. I'm certain of it. With the network in disarray and Lukács doing all he can to expunge the ghost AIs and the assaulters from it, granting her a QEC was the most practical thing to do, my prince. You need not spend most of your time here, if I must be honest. You should rest, let the people see you, and form bonds with the representatives present." The prince scoffed. "What more can I do, Juliana? Treaties have been signed, promises made, poison swapped, and compromises reached. The people know I am here. The entirety of the principality knows I'm here, alive. I will not cower. You know this. A warrior I am not, but I will not be found wanting in courage." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Not again." "My prince," said the blue-haired woman with a mix of awe and unflinching respect. "Then it will be as you desire. May I, however, inquire as to Amelia's status?" The prince wanted to chuckle at that response, but managed to suppress it. "She's been quiet. Not a single demand has been uttered, not one request proposed. She is all too happy to satiate the noble houses around and under her. Many lesser and minor nobles have answered the call, thanks to her, and thousands of commoners have volunteered themselves to assist in this great effort as part of the army or the navy." "We need those bodies," Juliana admitted. "Too many deserted, were captured, or killed. On that note, my prince, the personnel we picked from Woodshaft may lack discipline, but most have required minimal training. They have proven to be a boon in more ways than one." She paused for a moment as the prince ever so slightly turned his head toward her in curiosity. "Vivian can give you a detailed report if you wish to read it, my liege. But the important part about it is that they guide the recruits under them to perform their assigned duties to the best of their developing abilities, even if they are quite vulgar about it." "Vulgar?" the prince asked, intrigued. "They curse a lot, and their vocabulary is frankly to be admired." She smirked. "Quite imaginative, too. My drill sergeants were impressed." "You know exactly how to take my mind away from my worries, don't you?" he thought as he allowed himself a short-lived, soft chuckle, silently thanking his friend and companion at the same time. "Will you bestow upon me a demonstration?" "Perish the thought, my prince," Juliana answered back, losing her smirk. After a second-long pause, she carried on. "Alexander and Giovanni are still out there, my liege. The damnable traitors have not captured them, else we would know by now. That, or Duke Cornelius has decided to keep quiet in regards to them." The prince nodded. "I wish for all my siblings to be here, but I can't desire the impossible. Aside from Clara, I would like for Alexander to be here. He and I don't see eye to eye in most subjects, but we do not call upon ill on each other. If he were he could focus on the smaller picture and the problems at hand while I deal with the rest. Giovanni would be all too happy to take the spotlight and assist all those tiresome reunions and act as my voice." "Prince Giovanni does enjoy the attention and being fawned over," Juliana concurred. "To be frank, Juliana, I am forever thankful to a no-name commoner piloting a compost hauler of all things for delivering Clara to my side." The prince paused for a moment as the map shifted and focused on a segment with several golden and red dots blinking rapidly. "When our uncle delivered his speech, I feared she'd side with him. I could see it in her eyes." Juliana nodded. "You know Clara, your majesty," the prince snorted. "That I do. That's why she's my most beloved sister. A woman surrounded by a miasma of mystery that few can pierce. She, also, is not one to stand idle and is willing to take action into her own hands, even to her detriment." He paused for a moment. "If she had sided with Duke Cornelius, then his victory would be inevitable." Juliana looked at her prince, stupefied for a moment. "You cannot believe she's that pivotal despite everything she's capable of," she declared. "It was my mistake. I'll correct my words," the prince answered, watching as one golden dot vanished, but 5 red ones died in turn. "Had Clara joined our uncle, a dangerous piece on the board would have been removed and moved to his side. They are geniuses in their respective fields and both know how to play the games of nobility and politics almost better than anyone else across the principality. Imagine having to face both of them at the same time, in complete harmony with the advantage the Draymore loyalists possess right at this moment. I shudder at the mere proposition. As we stand now, I believe you are correct, my prince, Juliana began. Luckily for us, such a thing did not happen, and now she's fighting on your behalf, dealing with those cowardly Finnegans. Do you believe she will be victorious? Before he answered, he watched 2 more golden dots vanish from the group of a dozen, now reduced to 9. But the 19 red dots had been reduced to 6, and they were blinking out one after the other. I'm more concerned about what the Geenock will demand in return. She told me her plan. Plans within plans. It's both frightening and worthy of respect and recognition how she manages to create intricate webs out of assumptions and possibilities. More so how she molds those webs to changing factors. She is not one to set a goal and achieve how she wants. Rather, she allows events to guide her fingers as she knits a trap around her adversaries. He paused for a long moment until the last red dot was gone and the display returned to its original state. I worry for her. I understand you, my prince, and I share your worries, Juliana replied with a soft tone. It seems Vashakati has defeated another group. Congratulations are in order? She asked, unsure. Later, the prince countered. We must first open a corridor between us and Finnegan territory. The second princess will be victorious and we must stand ready. Lukacs, he commanded, his eyes glowing for a second. A few moments later, a voice spoke in his mind. Yes, my prince. How may I be of service? Lukacs Ishtal replied. Have the engineers and technicians made progress with the black ship? The prince asked, projecting a serious, regal aura through the shared link. Nothing since 3 days prior, my liege. The reactor they can understand, but this boogeyman armor and how it is made and operates is a mystery. Whenever they take a sample, the armor becomes brittle. Any invasive intrusion yields the same results. In theory, we know how it operates and what it does. In practice? The man paused, ashamed. My technicians are convinced there is a safeguard mechanism that's preventing reverse engineering from taking place. The traders surely have the same problems as us, but since we haven't encountered any black ship that appears to have been using Principality standards, it is safe to assume they too are stopped by these unknown countermeasures. Prioritize research on the black ship after the network is secured across Finnegan space, the prince ordered. My liege. Then the link died. I pity him greatly. My prince? Juliana asked. Lukacs, House Ishtal sided with my uncle, yet he remained loyal. His case is not unique, but I pity him regardless, the prince answered. I shall incorporate him into my inner circle once this conflict is over if we survive it. He's a talented man, intelligent, loyal, and dutiful. Yes, I shall reward him handsomely. Agreed, Your Majesty. Since you brought up pitiful things, my liege, have you considered that perhaps Lord Gabriel and Lady Veronica stand against their treacherous father? Veronica would never even think about betraying her father. A sempitern would grace the principality with their presence before Veronica even conjured the shadowed whisper of the idea of betrayal against her father. But Gabriel? He paused for a moment. My cousin is not as single-minded as Veronica, and certainly he's not nearly as zealous as she is. If he stands against his father, then I hope he is not treated unkindly. Another long silence passed between them, broken only by the background noise of steady work. Suddenly, the holographic display began to glitch out and every screen went dark. Juliana unsheathed her sword, activating it as 10 Royal Marines suddenly materialized around the prince, their distortion fields disengaging. The prince stood, looking around at the chaos. Some people screamed in pain, others fell to the ground in a fit of painful seizures, the consequence of being abruptly disconnected from the network. The phenomenon lasted for several seconds until everything seemed to return to normal. Before anyone could gather the courage to verify any station, the holographic map died out and then projected a bound, bloody, and broken Frederick Anderson. Before the man stood the prince, Clara, and Redford. Every screen came back to life displaying the same scenario, taken from the perspective of a security camera. "Shut the transmission down!" Juliana cried out, awakening many from their stunned stupor. Rushing to their consoles, personnel tried to access their consoles, but no command obeyed them. "We can't! We're locked out of the system! It's widespread across the whole network!" one shouted. "Locate the source immediately!" countered the Winfield. "It's no use!" another shouted, using a portable locator. "The signal is coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It's within the network itself. Who is responsible for something like this?" Juliana asked angrily, unable to do anything about it. Looking at her left, she watched 2 Royal Marines connecting to a terminal. Hoping against hope, she waited with bated breath until one of the Royal Marines turned to her and shook their head. For his part, the prince only stared at the projection with a glacial stare of indifference, waiting for what was about to happen next. His wait only lasted half a minute as the still images began to move and voices were heard. "Please, my prince, I have not betrayed you," Frederick Anderson pleaded. "You invited discourse within my fleet, evidence found in your possession, and plans to assassinate me were uncovered. Yet you claim innocence?" the prince asked in a cold, emotionless voice. "Fabrication! Lies!" Frederick countered. "House Anderson will pledge itself to your cause, my prince. I am loyal. I am a potential heir of my house. You cannot do this to me. The evidence is inconclusive at best." "Silence!" Clara roared, moving forth to strike the helpless man across his face, causing him to spit blood and his lower lip to be ripped slightly. "Confess to your crimes, or House Anderson shall know my wrath, you vile, treacherous snake." Her eyes narrowed as a sadistic smirk spread across her lips. "Or do you deny House Astor's rightful rule and sentence? I say that the evidence points you as a traitor, and so it is true. Confess." "I'm a loyal son of the Principality," Frederick pleaded, gritting his teeth. "I have been nothing but loyal." "I tire of this drivel," the prince said, turning his back to Frederick. "Redford, end him. Know that you shall die as the scum you are, and that your house shall pay the price in due time, Frederick. We shall find your conspirators and end them too." "My prince, no, I am loyal. My house is loyal. You can't do this to me. To us," Frederick pleaded as Redford silently unholstered an odd-looking rifle from his back. It was mostly rectangular, bulky, and was aesthetically ugly. The old man squeezed the trigger, and a reeving echo was heard at the same time the barrel of the rifle changed from a grotesque, opaque, silvery color to bright orange. "My prince!" "I'm the prince. I can do as I please. Nobles lead, commoners follow. To royalty such as I, even nobility is nothing more than commoner stock," the prince said as Frederick twitched in pain, foam forming at the mouth as blood vessels popped inside his eyes and scarlet blood trickled down his cheeks and out his ears. Within moments, Frederick Anderson was dead, his gray matter liquefied inside his skull by a high-yield microwave rifle. "Shall we toss his body out, brother dearest?" Clara asked, while staring at the corpse of the noble, smiling with sick amusement. "Store it! We will need it for when we meet the rest of his treacherous house," the prince ordered, then hummed. "Noble houses fall, others rise. Who shall rise in their stead? I can't." The transmission suddenly glitched out, and everything went black for several seconds. Then power returned, and everything returned to normal. "My prince!" The voice of Lukacs Ishtal cut through the speakers across the command room. "I've managed to purge the system and eliminate the intruder. Only a third of the runtime passed. I shall find who is responsible for spreading this monstrous fabrication against your honor, my prince." The prince sat down on his chair, eyes fixated on the returned map. He said nothing even as his heart pounded with indignation and anger. It was obviously a fake, a construct meant to sow chaos, mistrust, doubt, and fear. Lukacs had managed to cut it short, but the damage had been done. He didn't bother to issue a containment order. Whoever had done it had prepared extensively for this singular attack, and now it was spreading across the wide and birth of the Principality, outside of his control. In his mind, an imaginary chessboard manifested itself with a few pieces already moved. He moved a white bishop and ate one of his black pawns, eliminating it from the board. "Clara," he whispered, "may your ventures find success soon." In a distant location, unbeknownst to the prince, Jade stood up from his seat after using a short-range electromagnetic pulse to fry his equipment before exiting his hiding hole for the last time. He tossed a black grenade inside the room as he closed the door. As he walked away from the abandoned building, a blinding white flash shone behind him. "For the Principality," he muttered solemnly.